Again, I got the cold since yesterday, so if I'm not very intelligible, just tell me, like, I'll repeat what I said, because I need to power through this talk a bit, because we have a lot of ground to cover. So first of all, hello everyone. This talk is called A Series of Tubes. We're not going to talk about the internet, which I hope you're all more or less familiar with at this point. Before we begin, since we've had a lot of new people, I thought I'd still leave the intro slide. So I'm Maxime Fabre, I'm French. This is me doing some urban exploration thing. I've been at Maeve for a while. I do some music, photos, drawings and shit. This is my fucking cat. And I really like to think about the past and future, but like the way people used to live and the way we're gonna live, not the big things. So why a series of tubes? If you haven't heard the quote before, so it's a quote, this is the full quote. And it's a quote from Ted Stevens, who was a senator on the committee to regulate the internet. And it's pretty much a lot of bullshit. And he said that in context, in opposition to net neutrality, to give you a bit of an idea, so really stand-up guy. So why did I make this talk? The internet nowadays takes like a really huge chunk of our lives. I think like for a lot of people out there, this is like the pyramid of needs, like what random shit, and then just everything else so I don't die. The internet is so important that there's a lot of countries that are like pushing to make it a public utility, and if you don't know, there's not that many of them. There's like water, electricity, sewage, and phone, and that's more or less it for some countries. So it's really big that the internet will be a part of that. So as a web company, we change the internet every day, okay? We push code, we make websites, we make web apps, but we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what the internet does to us on a daily basis, and even less to think about what it does to all of us as cities, as societies, and even as a species on a global basis. So because we're going to talk about global phenomenons and all that, what I'm going to say may not necessarily apply to you, but they've been observed in big enough quantity that they can be considered, things that are happening. So a bit of quick definition, what is the internet? First of all, it's not that. I know that some of you miss it, but it's not coming back, so just let it go. The internet, first of all, is a lot of things. So when people say the internet, what they actually mean most of the time is the World Wide Web. So it's like browsing page and all that. But the internet has a lot of hidden parts. So there's, of course, FTP, emails, there's a lot of chat protocols. There's a lot of hidden depth under the internet, under the web page and all that constitute this network. So the internet, by definition, is a network of networks. So it's a network that is accessed by both people and machines. So that means that, for example, for the internet, there's not that much difference between these two. So you can make of that what you will. So what has the internet done to us? That's the question. First of all, it's important to remember that we are still in the curve for the internet. So the curve is like the curve of transformation, how it's going to transform our societies. Because we're still in the curve, we're very bad at observing these changes because they are still happening and we're not sure how it's going to evolve in the coming years. So all of this is what we have currently observed, but it's possible that as the internet is in constant evolution, it's going to change again. So we're going to look at a few types of changes. There's like biological changes, psychological changes, societal changes, and cultural changes. So those are not exclusive. Some of them overlap, and there's even some changes that are kind of like part of all four of them. So we're going to start with the easy ones, which is the body changes, because those are the ones that most of you as individuals can probably observe sometimes. So the first one is, I guess, what some of you have observed, that we have worse memory than before. And the reason for that is that we actually learn things differently than we used to. The internet is like a fire hose of information, and our brains just weren't made for that. They weren't made to deal with that. So what our brain did is that what they did all the time is that they adapted, and they adapted from memorizing information to finding it. So your brain was like, okay, that's too much for me to handle. So instead of remembering all of that, I'm just going to get better at finding the one information I want in all of this mess. The problem is that now that our brains have adapted, they seek new information like a drug. So every time you have like a bunch of information, your brain is going to want more always. And that has a huge impact on your focus. However, it does have some good impact because this is a different kind of brain activity, finding information versus memorizing it. So in your old age, it's actually really good because it keeps your brain moving all the time, and it prevents your brain from like rotting and becoming kind of decrepit. Another thing that has changed is that we're a lot more independent with the internet. Okay, we can If you don't know how to cook, if you don't know how to build a fire, if you don't know how to do whatever, you just Google it, you watch a YouTube video, and now you can do it. And that's good. The other side, of course, is that without the internet, we're much, much less individual. The reason for that, no, not the reason for that, one of the good examples for that, for example, and I think some of you may relate, is we have a worse sense of orientation than before. It used to be that you go from place A to place B, you would have to memorize, okay, I'm gonna go left to this tree and like go kind of right 2 streets down. Nowadays, you just put the address and you're good to go, which means that your sense of orientation is never trained. You just follow the steps and you never memorize the road, you just follow the little arrows. The problem, basically, with the internet is that when you seek information on demand, it is not retained very long because your brain is gonna be like, okay, I could learn this in 5 seconds, I'm gonna be able to do the same thing the next time. So it's just not gonna even memorize what you just watched, and you're gonna have to Google it again the next time, most likely. This also ties into the memory issue, of course. Relevant KCD as always. The next thing we're gonna talk about after that, it's also something that's been talked about a bit this week, is attention spans, which is another big impact the internet has had on us. So I said that the internet is a house of information, and researchers used to call this the age of information. And in recent years, they've actually changed that to the age of interruption because they find this more accurate. So the age of interruption is like you're working on something and you have like pings everywhere and notification and an email comes in and all that. So that's the age of interruption. The impact this has had is that we're better at multitasking. The reason why is because when you're working on something and that there's a lot of things happening, notification, etc., your brain adapts, again, to handle all this. So it adapts to working on an article and also expecting a Slack message that's going to come in or an email or something, and your brain can think on multiple levels like that. But for each task, you get less efficient than you used to. So you can do more things, but worse at each task. The reason for that is that your brain always expects another task after the current one, and so it doesn't give 100% to the one you're working on. So you're working on an article, and your brain is like, okay, I know that there's going to be an email or some shit coming in, so I need to already prepare for that, and I can't give you 100% focus on the article. And it's actually one of the reasons that focus mode or slow mode, as we discussed a bit earlier, just works so much, because it tells your brain, okay, you're safe, there's not going to be notification, there's not going to be email, you can just focus on what you're doing, and you're in a safe place. So this is, if you haven't done it, if you haven't tried it, I really recommend it. Another thing is that we have a much less patience and tolerance for waiting. And what's funny about that is that it actually correlated to internet speed. So the higher speed your internet is, and the less patience you have. So people in emerging countries, they are used to like waiting 1 minute to load a web page. To them, it's not a problem. But if I'm at my home and my page takes like 4 seconds to wait, I'm like, no, fuck it, I just close the tab and try to do something else. The reason, the impact that this has had is that we've had a much harder time doing long-time focused tasks like reading a book, reading a run article, something that really requires you to delve into a task for long periods of time. Your brain just doesn't have as much patience as it used to be to do that. This is one of the statistics, for example, that was in one of the researches that I found. So 17% of the views lasted less than 4 seconds, which is really not that much. That means like people just go on a page, and immediately they know if they're going to read the article or they're going to do something, otherwise they just close the page. Another one that Jonas is probably going to have some comments on is social networks. So social networks, they're not the main mean of internet consumption. Some of you may say, okay, that's bullshit, but you need to think about the fact that for a lot of people, the internet is like Facebook, and that's it, or just email, or just Twitter, and they don't go on any other website. And more than that, depending on your definition of what a social network is, for example, Reddit could be considered a social network, then it encompasses a lot more people. If Reddit is a social network, then I fit into this as well. The reason for this is that they've expanded to many different areas. Okay, social networks at first were like, okay, friends and family, but nowadays there's like e-commerce, activism, you can do dating, you can do education. So social networks have kind of adapted to everything. So you have this bunch of different websites that are very, very focused on one thing. But they've changed the way we socialize. It used to be that you would have few large groups of people. So you would have, for example, work and home, and those were your two social networks. But nowadays, since it's become so specialized, people have lots of very, very small social networks that are specialized on one aspect. So for example, Jonas could have, for example, like a magic social network somewhere, like a Slack channel or something that they visit. I could have something, a hobby for urban exploration, and I'm going to talk to people that have similar interests. So you have like a collection of small networks around you. But the problem is that we do more interactions, but they have less individual meaning. So this is something actually that we talked about earlier this week. So there are some exceptions for friends and family, but generally speaking, interaction on social media have less meaning for us. Another thing is that people who are truthful on the social networks, they are happier and for longer because they can be themselves, they can share things that are intimate to them, and this happiness lasts a lot longer than it would outside of a social network, like in real life physical interactions. But of course, the other side of that is that people who are untruthful on social networks, they're miserable because they have to keep a constant cover for everyone. So like, I don't want to say Instagrammers, but I'm going to say Instagrammers. And they have to like keep this cover of who they are and like fake, pictures at the beach and all that. And that has a really huge impact on your psychology because you're never yourself, and that's never a good thing. So the big change, mostly that social networks brought, is that social interactions are asynchronous. So if I have a funny picture and I want to share it with a friend, I can do it at 2 a.m. and I will see it the next day. And so you have kind of like this, what do you call it? Desynced communication where you can just share things whenever you want, which is a lot more flexible and which is a lot more adaptable to each individual. Then we get to touchy subjects. So anonymity. The fact is that the internet wasn't made for anonymity. Like the very idea of IP addresses is completely opposite to anonymity. But the internet is very good for pseudo-anonymity, which is like you're anonym to your peers, but not to probably governments and entities and all that. So pseudo-anonymity has lots of use cases. First of all, if you have social anxiety, it's very good. You can just share things and not be worried. It's good if you're a whistleblower or you're in an oppressed government or something like that. So there's a lot of cases where it can be a good thing. It's not necessarily bad to be anonymous. Sometimes you don't want your name to be revealed, and sometimes you need not your name not to be revealed. Anonymity can arise biases and subjectivity. So if you're on the internet and you share something, nobody has to know which gender you are, or what country you came from, how old you are, and all that. And those are things that people have biases on, and if you erase that, that means that they only can judge you on the things that you say. And it's the same thing for subjectivity. But of course, anonymity erases accountability, which is a very big thing. So you have a lot of illegal websites and everything because people know that they can be found out. And accountability is really important to us as individuals and also to our brains because it is what keeps us in check. The fact that you can have repercussions, to most people at least, is what prevents you from doing bad stuff. Not necessarily killing people, it can just be a mundane thing, but that's what keeps you in check. So, the problem is that online interactions, they don't register like physical ones to us. So it's a completely different, not part of the brain, but it doesn't really overlap entirely. And this leads, combined with anonymity, to online disinhibition. So psychology researcher John Soler, he categorized that into two. The first one is benign disinhibition, which makes you your true self. So you're on the internet, you're a bit anonymous, and you have less repercussion. So you will share more things about yourself. You will be more open, you will be more yourself. That's a really good thing, okay? Because it erases your emotions, your fears, your wishes, and it makes it so that you're not constrained by society. You can just do whatever you want. And again, the other side of the coin, of course, is toxic disinhibition, which is what you see every day on the internet. So this is like rude language, anger, hatred, and basically everything you can find in Twitter DMs. And it can be both if, really you have some problems. Another part of the internet is that we're now more than the sum of our biological parts. So that may be a bit vague, but what I mean by that is that the internet allows us to do things that our body can do. For example, and this is an example that I really like, this is Seeing AI by Microsoft, so it's like glasses that you put on, and it uses machine learning and all kind of buzzwords to pretty much tell blind people what they're seeing at any given moment. So they're like IR glasses, but without the need to see. Why is that? Is because the internet allows us to bridge technologies more easily. So the internet allows us to just take APIs and use various websites and as building blocks. And so you can have this crazy idea where you just build upon the work of people. For example, I was talking to Geoffrey yesterday about his music library. And I said, someone's going to probably come and do something over it, and then someone will do something on top of that library until you get something really crazy that just at the base were just some basic functions. So this is really important because ideas are important, and this is why the internet was created. And maybe in 10 years, we will have like AR glass that integrate GPS into your, whatever you want. People have a lot of ideas, and the internet allow them to realize them. All they need right now for the craziest ideas, the one that we haven't seen yet, the one that we're going to see in 20, 30 years, are the means of technology. And those means, they expand exponentially. So like our technology is getting better and better at a faster rate than before. If you look like the time it took us to get from to the Industrial Revolution, if you compare that to when did the internet arrive and how much it's already changes, it's a completely different time scale. And the most important part is that these ideas are taken from a worldwide pool. So it used to be that if you live in some like remote village somewhere in India or something and you had a crazy idea that could change the world, well, you were pretty much fucked. But now if you have this idea, you can just make a Kickstarter or whatever, crowdfunding, and if people like your idea enough, it can become a reality even though you're just alone in your corner of the world. And that's really important because the internet was made to share ideas, and the crazier ideas we finance, not necessarily finance, but believe in, and the easier we're going to get to these crazy technologies that we can't even imagine yet. So this idea of taking ideas, actually from everyone around the world, it goes back to a concept that is called the global brain. So the global brain is like the fact that the internet connected all of us, kind of like neurons in a nervous system. So we can share information with anybody throughout the world, and this idea have a life of their own. They live and they die, depending on who shares them and who stops sharing them. And so the global brain is like the sum of all these interconnected people. So this brain knows, for example, the price of an orange in Brazil. It can know like who killed who in history. So it's the sum of all our knowledge that we can share on Wikipedia, that we can share on social media, that we can share between ourselves. All this idea creates like a giant system where ideas can live. And of course, yeah, it has a life of its own. But we'll go back to this idea a bit later because it's important to the end of the talk. So let's talk a bit about our societies now. I think the first one, when you think about the changes the internet made on society, is of course the change to spying and data collection and everything Jonas just approached. So the first thing, of course, is that spying went from extracting information to collecting it. And that's a really big change. So it used to be that to spy on people, you would have to extract information and like try to, kind of get it into some shady means. But nowadays, people just share this information. And the only question is, are you going to collect it? For example, like Facebook and all that, that's what they do. That's their own model. This is a bit like the difference between the whole 1984 Brave New World issue. So people say, okay, we're going to go toward the 1984 dystopian where we have surveillance everywhere, and that's how you're going to be kept in check. And other people say, okay, this is more like Brave New World, which is a book where people are kept in check by just being distracted all the time by happy things. So you just focus always on something new, and there's like a cat video or something, and you forget about all the shady shit that is happening in the background. We know that the internet has been compromised for some time. I mean, as Jonas said, there's I don't know how many data leaks. I mean, I've received already like 12, I think, emails from Have I Been Pwned since I subscribed like 2 years ago, which is quite a lot. And of course, it has a drastic impact on politics, on advertising, and on everything, because this data can be weaponized in a lot of ways. And more importantly, it's weaponized against the people that shared in the first place, which is a really, really bad thing. Next, we're going to talk a bit about the media and the press and all that. So the internet transformed informative media. People just don't get informed the same way that they used to. They used to watch a TV or read the paper, and that was it. But nowadays, information is easier and it is faster to consume. And the fact is, like, for example, if there's a revolt in a country, the whole world is watching by the end of the day. And this puts enormous pressure on governing entities because they can just hope that nobody's going to hear about it because someone will just share it on Twitter and then it's going to be a mass outrage and they have to react quickly. But the problem is that this pressure is very short-lived. So it used to be like there used to be events that would, scandals that would last on for months, and nowadays you're seeing like Trump, etc., where you have big scandals and they last a day because the next day there's already something else to worry about. And people just forget over time all the scandals that they've seen. Another issue is that people are believing the news less and less. It's the whole fake news debacle, of course. So what people do is that instead they inform themselves through sources that they think they can trust. So the source can be Twitter. For a lot of people, it's sadly Facebook. And the problem with these sources is that, first of all, they're as easily manipulated as normal media. And the second issue is that because most of these sources are social networks, it leads to an issue of echo chambers and filter bubbles. So filter bubbles is like on Twitter, you're only going to get news from the people that you follow or the people that are connected to them. That means there's a whole world of opinions that you're never going to get exposed to. And echo chamber is a bit the same issue. It's when you have a group of people that are gathered around a central ID, and the IDs keep bouncing back between themselves, but it's never evolving. So you just keep repeating, the same concept, like I don't know, conservative groups and all that, and they're never gonna change their mind because they only talk among themselves. And this has led to a bit of an extra version of tribalism. So it's like all these small connected networks that I mentioned earlier, people now rally a lot more around them. So they identify by these networks that they created. So you say now, okay, no, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a ski fan or whatever it is. And they congregate around this idea, and they pretty much don't want to budge, and they criticize everything that isn't this group. The core central idea around this is strengthening members. So that's the power that the internet gave to the mass. So we talked a bit about revolts. For example, the Arab Spring was a very good example of that. So the internet gave to people the power to congregate around ideas organically and to do great things just very quickly. As groups, so they can apply great pressure to various entities, but of course, as we've seen before, that pressure doesn't necessarily last very long. But we've seen, for example, on Twitter, if a corporation sends a bad tweet or has a product that is very nasty for the environment or something, usually people will react, and there will be a hashtag or something, and even if the company doesn't necessarily solve the issue, they have to react to it, and they have to react to it fast, which is a big change compared to before. The problem, of course, is that these mobs can also be angry mobs, and there's been a lot of cases of like karma injustice, where someone said something on Twitter and it's taken out of context, and there's like 2,000 people that just fall on him, and the guy gets fired. These things happen all the time, and the thing is, people don't even think about it, because to them, this tweet out of context goes back to the idea of tribalism, but this is an idea that is different to them, and they're free to criticize it, because to them, that's the moral thing to do. Next, we're going to talk about what this means for the global brain ID. So all these people, they can congregate around ID, and they can get in groups bigger and smaller organically, depending on how important the ID is. And that means that mankind can now self-regulate on a global scale. So what I mean by that, for example, we've seen recently with all the strife for inclusiveness, equality, etc., that's something that comes from the internet, that has spread to every country, even though it's not a movement that has like someone at the top. It's just an idea that has spread through the internet, and people agree with this idea, and they say, okay, we need to do that. And this is really important, because in a global brain, like in a system, ideas live and die, and the more people congregate around an idea, and the less chance it has to die out. So the more you say, okay, I agree with the Me Too movement, which, for example, is a hashtag originally, and the more the chance it has to have an impact, and long-lasting impact. Another good example is, of course, another similar example is memes, for example. So memes, they might just be funny pictures and all that, but they live and die like organisms, depending on how many people share them, and depending on the current trends, etc. This idea, they live and die. And this is a bit similar to the ideas of, for example, Alan Watts, I think maybe some of you might know from before, which is the idea that mankind, no matter how many technology it has and how many or civilized we are, etc., we're not different from any other kind of natural system. So like, things live and die, things change, and our technology is just a different way to express that, a different way of mankind to evolve itself. And it still does that in a natural way. The central idea is that the internet shortened our feedback loop. So these things happen in a much shorter time scale than before. It's not that we haven't observed these phenomena before, but we've never observed them to such a short time scale that ideas just rise over a day and die overnight. So what are some threats that the internet is currently onto? First of all, I'm really sorry for that. The second I finished the Photoshop, I really regretted it. So the first threat to the internet is that major corporations have taken a hold of it. So in the beginning of the internet, you used to go to a lot of small websites, and nowadays you go to very few big websites. So like you go to Facebook, you go to Twitter, and those are really, really big things. And that means that we need to responsibilize people to what data they share on this website, because they don't know who's going to control the data at the other end. And that means we need to make sure that people don't just share things willingly. And so the reason I put this is because to me it's a bit like the Westworld problem. So I don't know if some of you, well, you may not all know the show Westworld, but basically it's like a park you can go and it's all Android, and so you can be wherever you want and it doesn't matter. But what people don't know is that everything they do is recorded. So we have to treat the internet like this. You can be wherever you want, you can be your true self, but you have to keep in mind that no matter what you share, someone at the other end has the data and they can do whatever they want with it. Another problem is, of course, censorship. So that's, again, one of the topics Jonas brought. So you have, of course, the big ones, so China and everything, who censors their whole internet. But it's not limited to that. There's, for example, in France and Germany, you can't have a website about Nazism. And it's just one form of censorship. And you could argue that it's a good thing. But you also need to think about who draws the line, and who gets to decide what is acceptable and what is unacceptable, and where do you say, okay, this is something that you can't say on the internet, which, I don't know, to me it's a bit weird. Another thing, of course, is that the internet is not serverless. I'm sorry. It doesn't live in the cloud, it's not magical. It's like huge data farms, and it doesn't consume that much electricity, which is like 2% of global consumption, which I expected to be a lot higher. But it takes a lot of space, it takes a lot of resources, and those resources could have been applied to better things. So for example, all these data farms, maybe you could have built housing there for people or whatever you want. So we need to be more conservative. We need to think about what we invest in the internet, and when you see funding round for big, social Silicon Valley startup and stuff like that, and you have millions being poured in, you have to ask yourself, maybe we could have done something better with that money than over Instagram. So we need to think about what we put on the internet and what we do with the resource that we attribute to it. Next, we're going to talk about what the internet is going a bit quickly. So the internet is probably here to stay, that's for sure. But we can't imagine how the internet is going to be like in 20 years, because we just don't have the capacity to picture big technological changes that are going to come. For example, VR and AR, we don't know what impact they're going to have on the internet. So that means we need to keep it neutral ground. And that means that, more importantly, we need to prepare for it now. So whatever the internet of 20 years is, whatever technology it uses, etc., we need to prepare for it now, because we are only likely going to get one shot at it. I mean, the internet, it was a huge success, etc., but it could have not been open source, and instead of that, Tim Berners-Lee could have said, okay, I'm going to make it pay, and then we would have like 4 or 5 internet, and you would have had to pick. So it's really important to really think about these decisions. There's multiple ways to do that. There's peer-to-peer internet, like Pied Piper and all that, but it's complicated to imagine. Another problem that a lot of people mention, of course, is AI. So we need to prepare now for intelligent AI. So nowadays, AI doesn't mean what it used to be. It used to mean any kind of intelligence, but now we make the distinction between AI, like machine learning AI, and AI, like someone you can talk to, like an actual thing that has an intelligence. So now we make the distinction. Yeah, a lot of people say that the evil AI idea is a bit bullshit and that it's not going to happen. But in case it happens, we need to be careful, because the internet is going to be its main means of conveyance, and it's going to have all the information that is on it. And so we need to be even more careful about what we put on the internet. If we don't put care, the internet is just a time bomb. It's like a huge data bank of what knows everything about everybody, and if it falls into the wrong hand, it can be really, really devastating. Basically, you need to have a say in what the internet knows about you. And that's, for example, in Europe, what we call the right to be forgotten. You need to be able to say, I don't want my data to be on the internet. I don't want someone to track me. I don't want someone to know where I am at all times. I want to have a life outside of the internet that nobody knows about. And it's getting harder and harder to do that, and I think Dieter can probably confirm. So what can we do? Do we just give up on the internet? It's just too much. In my mind, it is worth it, as long as the pros outweigh the cons, and for now, I think that they do, but this is very subjective. We need to keep in mind that we're not adapting to the internet. Our bodies are still changing, our societies are still changing, and I think, earlier this week, Andrea said that we're maybe not making the world a better place, and I think that's also a bit subjective, because as long as you contribute to a website that helps someone else throughout the world, you are, in a way, making the world a better place. The only thing you need to ask yourself is whether you could be doing that more efficiently. So the next time a client comes to you and he wants to do another social network or something like that, you need to think, okay, maybe we could do something that helps more people, like the Polity Watch ID and all these kind of ideas that people don't pour necessarily a lot of money into. So what can you do as individuals? First of all, the most evident one is just watch what you put on the internet. Always think that someone else gets the data, even if Facebook tells you your data is private, just don't believe them. Always assume everybody is a dick that's out to get you, and you just be really selective about what you put on the internet. Don't put all your eggs in the same basket, so don't just use Chrome because it's easy, and that's how corporations get more and more power. Try to diverse a bit between the website that you visit, try to see different opinions, try to get out of your echo chamber, try to see things a bit. And you need to remember what the internet was made for, which is sharing knowledge at a global scale. So you need to make sure that the changes we make to it go in that direction and that they don't negate it. Basically, you need to make sure that all voices are heard and that ideas can spread. So of course, that goes through inclusiveness and all that. If you see someone on the internet and they have an idea that you think is interesting but that nobody is noticing, it is your job to share it back and to make it spread. And this is how these ideas live and die, as we said before. So I guess the gist of this talk is you can go tweet, and you can go share pictures on Instagram, and you can go enjoy the memes and all that, as long as you don't let them distract you from the broader purpose of the internet, which is knowledge. You need to not be blinded by fake news or everything. You need to question things. You need to try to document yourself, because the internet is like this huge data bank of information. There's like seeds of information that you need to harvest, and it's your job to take these seeds and grow ideas from it. And as I think someone very wise once said, give me your seed, pumpkin. Do you have questions?
Any questions?
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer them, but you can try.